Hi, I'm Julie Goodwin. I'm here in my kitchen, Julie's Place, and I'm really excited to be showing you this beautiful dinner that's nice and simple for you to make for your family, or you could do it for a dinner party and lay it out in the middle of the table. It looks spectacular when it's cooked, but it's also yummy, so that's important. This is a chicken and cheese strudel, so a really nice pie. So the first thing I'm going to do is cook off a little bit of chicken or brown it up. I'm going to add to it some mushrooms and some cheese and some other beautiful flavours, and then I'll show you how to plait your pastry so it looks fancy. Fancy? Woo! Okay, so a good splash of olive oil into your pan, and I'm going to slice up, or dice up actually, some chicken thigh. And you want to use thigh for this recipe rather than breast, because breast chicken will dry out. If there's any massive chunks of fat on your chicken thigh, you can just take those off. But don't be too fussy about that, because a little bit of fat is a delicious thing. So just cut that into sort of fairly thick slices and then into squares. So cut it in the other direction. So you want about 800 grams of chicken thighs, and it'll depend on what size they are. So some are really huge and some are quite small. So about 800 grams for this little pie. So what I'm going to do with this chicken is just brown about a half of it at a time. And the reason for that is to give it a nice flavour. The brownness is flavour. And if I put all this chicken in at once, what'll happen is that instead of browning, it'll make the pan really cold and it'll sort of start to leak its juices out, and it won't be delicious, it'll just kind of be stewed. So we want a little bit of that golden colour to make sure that we've got beautiful browned chicken inside our pie. So I'm going to put away that fat and only put about half of this into the pan. At this point, really important just to spread it around and leave it alone until one side of it goes nice and brown. And this is why I like to use a really big flat bottom pan. Even if you're only cooking for 2 people, you're better off with a big flat surface, a nice hot surface to cook your food on, than a little pan where everything's going to get crowded and start to sort of steam and stew. So I've spread that out, I'm leaving it alone. I'm going to let it go for about a minute, and once I have, I'll flip it. It'll be lovely and golden brown. So our chicken's beautiful and browned. It's not cooked through, so that's going to happen in the sauce a little bit later on. But it's got that beautiful golden colour on it, which will mean beautiful flavour. And what I've done is I've moved the board and the knife that I chopped the chicken with. They're out of the way, they're in the washing up sink, so that there's no chance of cross-contamination with what we're about to do next. And what we're about to do next is all the prep for the rest of this dish. So first thing I'm going to do is chop some garlic. Now this garlic, the cloves are huge, that's a baby one, because this is a Russian garlic that's come from a local grower, so I'm very excited about it. It's milder than your normal garlic, so I'm okay with using cloves that big. But yeah, this was grown right up here on the Central Coast, and it's lovely. If you prefer to use a crusher than chopping with a knife, then go right ahead. The only reason I use a knife instead of a crusher is because my boys are in charge of the washing up and they never did a very good job of the crusher. So I prefer to chop it, but I don't think it makes any difference to the dish at the end of the day if you've got crushed garlic or chopped garlic, as long as it just needs to be fairly fine. That's lovely. The smell of that reminds me of being in my backyard when I was a little kid, digging up the spring onions. And I would pretend I was making food out of these wild spring onions that grew in the backyard. So we're going to slice up the mushrooms. They don't have to be too thin because mushrooms will shrink quite a lot. You want probably 4 or 5 slices out of these little cup mushrooms. If you buy your mushrooms with quite a lot of sort of dirt on the outside, just wipe them off. You don't want to wash mushrooms because they do take on a lot of moisture. And if they take it on, you're sort of diluting their flavour. Some people throw the stalks away, but I actually use them in my cooking. I don't think there's any need to throw them away, especially when they're this little. They're just as tender and just as tasty as the rest of the mushrooms, so there's no need to chuck them out. So into a nice hot pan, with another splosh of olive oil, in with your mushrooms, and you want them to sizzle. So what happens with mushrooms in a pan is that they sizzle away, they suck up everything you've put in there, whether it's butter or oil or anything, and then they release this liquid as they become soft. And what you need to do in order for mushrooms to be delicious is wait for that liquid to reabsorb or evaporate and the mushrooms start to become golden brown and delicious. They are a beautiful food just on their own, but not when they're only cooked to that kind of soggy grey stage. You need to give them the time to fry up and become absolutely beautiful. I'm just going to throw the garlic in there with them, because as soon as you put food into the pan, it means the pan is not as hot. So you don't want to throw garlic into a sizzling hot pan because it'll burn, and burnt garlic's not very nice to eat. So we've got this lovely sort of golden colour on the mushrooms. They're fried, they're delicious. What I'm going to do is add back in the browned chicken with all those juices that have accumulated and mix that up together. Oh, it smells so nice. Next step here, and this is the same with any kind of soup or pie filling or anything that you want thickened, is to sprinkle over a little bit of flour. So just plain flour, we don't need raising flour. And stir that in. Stir it all around so everything's coated. And what that means is that when you start to add liquid, that's going to make this beautiful sauce. So you can see how that's kind of turned into a little bit of dough around the chicken and the mushrooms. So we're going to add milk, about 1/4 cup at a time. In total we're looking at 1.5 cups of milk, but we're just going to add it a little bit at a time, about 1/4 cup, and you can see that that kind of becomes a dough. Once it becomes like that, sort of doughy, it's not liquid anymore, another little bit and do that again. This is the same process as if you're making a bechamel sauce or a gravy or anything that uses a thickening agent like flour. You add the liquid a tiny bit at a time and it doesn't go lumpy, it just becomes this beautiful, soft sauce. So next in goes a good dollop of Dijon mustard, which gives it an amazing amount of flavour. We're going to go in with about 2/3 of our cheese, about 2/3 of our beautiful chopped shallots, a really decent amount of grated white pepper. White pepper works better in this recipe because it's a white sauce. Good teaspoon of salt. I'm going to stir that around. And basically what needs to happen with any pie filling is that it needs to cool down before you add it to your pastry. So I'm going to let that cool down by getting it out of the hot pan and popping it into the fridge for a little while. But this is the kind of consistency you want for a pie filling. If it's too wet, your pie will fall apart. So you do need this kind of stiffness and stickiness to a pie filling. So my filling has cooled down. It's not all the way cold, it's still a little bit warm, but it's important that it's not really, really hot when you put it onto your pastry. I've just taken out the puff pastry from the freezer. It's really important that you don't take that out too early because it becomes floppy. At the moment it's frozen stiff, as you can see, so I can't use it just at the moment, but within a minute or two I'll be able to. So what I use is just the store-bought puff pastry. If you want to make your dish really special, there are some artisan pastries that you can buy. They're very expensive. I think that this makes a beautiful family meal, so no worries there. So I'm just going to leave that there to soften down enough to work with. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to beat 1 egg because I'm going to use that to glaze this pastry. So I'm just going to brush that with a pastry brush before I put it into the oven. And then I've chosen, besides some salt and pepper to sprinkle on the top, I've chosen some poppy seeds today. I do love poppy seeds. I love sesame seeds probably even more. If you've got, I don't know, dukkha or oregano or crushed nuts in your pantry, you can sprinkle those across your pie and just give that pastry an extra sort of a crunch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is peel off the blue plastic that comes with the pastry. And this is obviously something you can do with your own pastry if you choose to make it. But what we're doing is a nice easy midweek dinner, so we're using pre-bought pastry. At the moment it's still a little bit stiff, but it'll soften up as we work with it. So in between, so you need 2 sheets of pastry for this, in between a little bit of egg wash, and you can see how that's kind of pliable there. I'm going to pop that down and sew it together with your fingers. That's the most advanced sewing I ever did. Important to divide it into 3 equal spaces. Just run the back of your knife really gently down so you can keep it divided. Now what you want to do is turn this into kind of a Christmas tree. So you're going to go from the middle and you're going to make a 90-degree triangle like that with your knife. So cut those triangles out. And then down the bottom here, you're just going to take a square. So with that third that you've put into your pastry, that far up and that far across, and so then what you've got is this lovely Christmas tree shape that you're going to make your pie out of. What you need to do now, and this is where the kind of artistic part of you comes in, is down those thirds there, you're going to cut little strips in the same angle as that. So this filling now, I'm going to spread onto here. I'm going to leave that little point clear and spread it down the centre till I get to this little, the stem of the Christmas tree, if you like. So this is why it's important that it's fairly cool. If that was still hot, it would just kind of spread and it would stretch your pastry. Wouldn't be fantastic. So we're just going to sit it like this. I'm excited. My mouth's watering for this pie. So you're going to bring this point down over the top and then fold one strip over from the right and one over from the left, or left to right, depending on your preference. We're going to turn it into something that looks like a braid, like you're plaiting someone's hair. And you do this all the way down till you're almost at the bottom, one after the other. So when we get about this far from the bottom, we need to take the Christmas tree stalk and fold it up, and that'll keep everything in. And then just carry on with the braiding of our little Christmas tree branches. And there's our strudel. Now I've just got to brush it with a bit of egg wash and sprinkle it with some salt and some pepper and poppy seeds or whatever you like. So now all I need to do is pop that into the oven at about 200 degrees, nice and hot for puff pastry. The middle is cooked. All that needs to happen is that the pastry goes puffed and golden brown and it's ready to eat. So that is a really yummy chicken and cheese strudel. Not expensive to make and not hard when you know how to do it, but I think it's something that when you put it down for your family, they're going to be pretty excited to eat it. So whether it goes with some hot greens or a salad, whatever you like, dinner is done.